If you're curious what Backup Central is, this excerpt from our Restore It All podcast will answer that question. If you like it, make sure to check out the rest of the podcast by searching for Restore It All wherever you listen to podcasts. Hope you like it. Thanks for watching.
Could restore it all and rescue me from pain. You had my file inside your head. You erased it. How insane.
This is the Backup Central's Restore It All podcast. So a lot of people may
Right.
not be familiar with what is Backup Central. So maybe start from there.
So Backup Central is my website that, it originally started as a blog back in 1999, if you can imagine that, back before we even really had the term blog. And I did a lot of blogging over the years. We had some forums on there. Those forums have at this point have been turned into read-only forums because they just weren't generating the kind of attention that they used to, and they were more hassle than they were worth. So I just put them in read-only. But today, its primary purpose is the place from which you can go to anywhere to hear this podcast.
Yeah.
Right. So if you follow this podcast on backupcentral.com, each podcast has a blog post, and in that blog post is a link to all of the different places where you could potentially listen to the podcast. And also you can comment on episodes, right?
Yep. And a lot of the people
yeah.
who would be visiting this website, right, are probably like either vendors or backup admins or people who just care about backups or want to learn more, right, about data protection.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It is definitely aimed at, obviously, aimed at people that are interested in the same sorts of things that this podcast is about.
Tell us, how is this actually set up? Like, okay, it's a Backup Central website, but what
Yeah.
is it running on?
So it is a cPanel based, it's a Linux web host using cPanel, for those of you that are familiar with web hosting companies. And it runs in a company called Liquid Web, which it's been there for quite some time. I had another provider at one point, but I switched over to Liquid Web.
It wasn't
due to
OVH, was it?
It was it was not OVH. I don't think OVH was in existence back then. And the thing that pushed me over to Liquid Web was the superior amount of technical support. I remember my very first interaction with them was that I just clicked the contact us button at like 1 a.m, and I got really good answers, like technical answers about how this company worked, how the product worked, et cetera, what it was like to migrate from the other company over to this thing. I had all these technical questions, and I was amazed at, the expertise. And basically what I found out was that they had 24/7 tech support. And and at nighttime, they just connect the sales, button to the tech support people.
Yeah.
And that,
which is crazy because you're just like a single user, right, who hasn't even bought their service yet, right?
Yeah. And back then it was like, $20 a month or something.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than that now, but back then it was a lot smaller. And they answered my questions, and boom, I became a customer. And it is definitely a fully managed, hosted WordPress site that also happens to use MySQL in the back end.
Could